Film Club.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Film Club. I'm one of your hosts, Andy Harrison, and with me, as always, it's Andy Donaldson.
Hello.
Every week in Film Club, we invite you along to watch a film with us, and this week we're celebrating Halloween with Carrie.
Carrie, 1976 version to be specific. It's a story about the cruelty of school, and especially those kind of school bullies, but maybe more so on steroids, because these guys are super bad, mixed with kind of the paranormal, a coming-of-age film, set with a very, very weird background for the young, naive Carrie. And you've not seen this before, have you, Andy?
No, I've weirdly bit of a strange background with it. I've seen tons of clips of this. I've studied it in the past, but I've never sat down and watched the whole thing.
I haven't seen it in probably about 20 years. And it's really interesting rediscovering it. Not only did we not know that it was Brian De Palma that directed it, someone who've recovered recently with films like Blowout, and it was Dog Day Afternoon, was it?
Scarface.
I did enjoy it again. I really did enjoy it, but it wasn't half as scary as I remember. How did you feel?
Yeah, so I don't find Carrie a particularly frightening film on the whole. I know that at the time it was quite shocking, quite abrupt, quite in your face. This does sort of occur in the first, early half of Brian De Palma's career. So we're still in an era where people haven't quite adapted to things like, B-movie horror in the vein of John Carpenter. We haven't got to the slasher era yet, post-Halloween. And Carrie does a couple of disturbing things that I really appreciate, that I actually see a lot of similarity to with the work of Ridley Scott with Alien. It's very clean, it's very pristine. She's meant to be this sort of pure virgin character. And to give her that instigation of having a first period and having this horrible moment, which, by the way, absolutely stellar scene to kick this off with, because I think part of the reason that some people, and you and I can't really speak to the female experience, right? But I think part of the reason that some people find this so terrifying from the outset is that opening sequence is enormously anxiety-inducing. It's horrifying. This occurs before we've even established Carrie as a character. Yeah. And we're immediately brought into this horrible experience with her, where something that should be normal and natural is instead put on display in front of a bunch of teenagers that have no empathy, and instead just run wild with it and act in an immensely cruel way. As the film goes on, we sort of get away from the horror a lot of the time. The horror really is this building tension of what's going to happen to Carrie at the prom.
It does lead up to that prom scene, and it's a very terrifying scene. And one of the things I want to point out why it works so well with me, let's say, is as soon as the blood happens, pretty much all the audio gets stripped out.
Yep.
And it was so unusual and so eerie to have that. You just had very basic sound effects. The dialogue and the audio of the crowd, of the students, was just stripped out. And it slowly seeps back in as the realization of Carrie's got blood all over. I found that personally very eerie, and it was superbly well done, if not a bit weird. But I think it really worked.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a similar technique to what he uses in terms of inducing that anxiety in the shower scene earlier in the film. And to have this film be this little tale of two halves, where it opens with obviously her in the shower, and it closes with her being showered in blood. He feeds you into this haze. When he's creating that layer of audio, and he's creating those layers of visuals, especially he does this sort of even more intensely after the fact, when she starts to really snap, and he starts to layer visuals on top of each other as well, by splitting the screen in two and showing you multiple things at the same time, just to even more try and overwhelm you with an extra element, just to ensure that you don't quite know where you're looking, you don't quite know where you're listening at all times.
The use of dissonant strings in that moment, or in the moment as soon as she's had the blood poured on her, but also when her mother goes to a window and it shuts, it's almost like Psycho, the link, the stabbing strings. And it kind of leads us to Pino Donaggio, who did the music for this film. There is a fantastic piece of music where Carrie returns home, blood-soaked, and leads herself to the bath. It's just so mesmerizing. And it just not long after, there's a scene with her and her mother, where it's a brilliant performance, by the way. And it's again, the music that's played is horrifyingly beautiful. it's it's put alongside these horrifying scenes. There's a brilliant scene with Piper Laurie, who plays her mother Margaret, where she's just staring down in this fanatically religious individual with a knife, post stabbing Carrie, but trying to stab her more, and she's got this look of hysteria in her eyes, and it's just terrifying. That's for me like the scary part is her mother, just this individual that puts in the chokey, and it's terrifying. But yeah, really cool use of sound.
Her mother also has one of my favorite uses of like visual symbolism throughout the entire film. The fact that when she's eventually killed, when Carrie eventually, stabs with all those knives, she's left to in a crucified position with those knives in her body, which is just one for one looks like the statue that's inside of their little home chokey of Jesus. There's the statue that early in the film Carrie prays at for forgiveness.
Sorry,
he's stabbed.
Chokies tickle me like hell.
He's stabbed in I think 3 or 4 different places, and she echoes that with her stabbing later on. Just beautiful little touches like that I think have made the film much more elevated beyond what it could have been. I think that De Palma really understood the work and was able to sort of like adapt that to cinema in a very direct manner, but didn't steer away from changes. Like, do you know he actually changed the ending of the film?
Oh, is this where that hand comes out?
Yeah, that scene isn't actually from the book at all. That scene's completely added by De Palma, and I think it adds a lot to it. Not only does actually, it's one of those few jump scares where I kind of appreciate it because it's just a little goodbye. It's a very, very typical thing that would happen with like slashers later on. If you think about like Friday the 13th or whatever the Jason franchise is called. Whereas I love that Carrie has basically no jump scares throughout the entire film except that one at the end.
But I think a huge testament to Sissy Spacek, who kills it throughout this film. She has this wonderful kind of kind-hearted nature. She has this terrified nature. She has this, as you mentioned, this anxiety there. She has this incredible look about her, that iconic Carrie look where she's wide-eyed. All these factors come into play, and I think Sissy Spacek does a fantastic job.
You nailed it, right? The fact that she's able to do the sort of the quiet, timid wallflower in one scene, and then when you cut that moment where she's drenched in blood, eyes widened, she is just, with such little in terms of makeup and production value behind her, she's the picture of horror. The reason that like the Carrie image and the woman soaked in blood standing on the stage with the eyes wide, like the fact that that's gone down in history as a piece of iconography is for the most part all on her. The way she plays that is just astounding.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure we give a little bit of a mention here to Mario Tosi. Now, not technically Mario Tosi, I credit with this, but he's the cinematographer for the film. And the reason I'm not going to say it probably wasn't his decision. Brian De Palma obviously loves his split diopters. I think we mentioned it when we were talking about Blowout and the fact that he was using split diopters in that. But it's lovely to see it here again because it doesn't get used as much as it should. It's a great little technique.
Absolutely. And a fantastic looking film as well.
But there is Carrie. You can let us know in the comments below what you thought of Carrie. But Andy and I are going to be back once again next week where it's time to take a look at the killer.
Cheers, guys.
Until then, get watching.